In this very short tutorial, we're going to focus on just a couple of small further aspects of light. First of all, in the last tutorial we looked at how light is made, and we looked at the fact that light is very small packets of energy called photons. How fast do these photons travel? Well, it's absolutely incredible. Physicists tell us that nothing travels faster than the speed of light in the universe. So just how fast is this? It's been measured that photons travel at around about, or very close to, 300,000 kilometers per second. So in 1 second, a photon of light will have travelled 300,000 kilometers. So they say this is the fastest thing we know of in the universe. Nothing travels faster than the speed of light. 300,000 kilometers per second. Because of this, astronomers particularly have developed a measure of distance for the vast distances that they see in space. And they use light as a measure of distance. Let's see how they do this. Because distances are so incredible in space, astronomers measure distance in terms of the distance that light travels in 1 year. And they call this measurement a light year. So a light year is a measure of distance. And it is the distance that light travels in 1 year. So 1 light year is the distance that light travels in 1 year. 2 light years is the distance that light would travel in 2 years. 3 light years is the distance that light would travel in 3 light years. Now what's absolutely incredible is if you look at this little picture here, the distance from Earth to our nearest star, which is called Proxima Centauri, the distance to our nearest star is 4.24 light years. Alright? So just some incredible number of kilometers, and that's to our nearest star. So how would we calculate the number of kilometers in a light year? Well, let's have a look. So remember, light travels at 300,000 kilometers per second. So how far then would it travel in a year? Well, we can work this out like this. So if it travels 300,000 kilometers in a second, how far would it travel in a minute? Well, there are 60 seconds in a minute, so we need to multiply 300,000 by 60. So this is how far light would travel in 1 minute. How far would it then travel in 1 hour? Well, there are 60 minutes in an hour. So we multiply it by 60 again. So this is how far light would travel in 1 hour. How many hours are there in a day? 24 hours. So if we multiplied this by 24, this is how far light would travel in 1 day. And then there are 365 days in a year. We multiply that by 365, and this is how far light would travel in 1 year. You might like to get your calculator out and see what that number comes to. Okay, if you've done your calculation, it comes out at something like this. Alright, so if light travels at 300,000 kilometers in a second, then in 1 year it travels that distance. So that's a measure of 1 light year. If you want to measure 2 light years, you multiply that by 2. 3 light years, or 4 light years, or 5 light years, or 1,000 light years, you multiply this number by whatever that factor is. Let's move on to another part of the homework, and that's to look at what's called a luminous object and a non-luminous object. A luminous object is simply an object that gives off its own light. So it produces its own photons. So examples of this would be something like the sun. So the chemical reactions in the sun produce photons that stream out into the universe, and of course that's the sunlight that we see every day. A light globe that's switched on would be a luminous object. A candle that's a light would be a luminous object. The screen on your mobile phone, when it's on, is a luminous object. So all these things give off their own light. Another kind of object that we would come across is a non-luminous object. And non-luminous objects, quite obviously, do not give off their own light. I'm sure you can think of plenty of examples. Yourself, you'd be a non-luminous object. Carpet, a chair, bricks, glass, whatever's around you that's not actually producing its own light is a non-luminous object. Some of these objects can look like they sometimes give off light because they're reflecting light from somewhere else. So something like the moon in our sky is actually a non-luminous object, even though it looks like it's shining at night. We talk about moonlight, but light coming from the moon is not made by the moon, it's reflected from the sun. So the sun light is reflected off the moon and then travels further onto Earth. So the moon is a non-luminous object because it doesn't produce its own light. It's reflecting the light of the sun.